This week's blog post is part 1, covering 1900 to 1909, of a timeline covering 1900 to 2021. Starting this week, there will be 12 posts with an illustrated decade-by-decade timeline for the years 1900 to 2021. If you're a supporter, or on my Free Sunday Recommendations email list, you'll receive by email on this Saturday or Sunday an 8-page PDF with the timeline for 1900 to 1909. I would very much like to hear your reactions to it. There's a section later in this post on feedback with some specific questions. To join the free email list or become a supporter, see the More section at the very end of this post. Let me tell you briefly about the goal of this timeline. Few of us are completely happy with the world as it is. But to change the future, you have to know the past. What actually happened? What ideas drove those events? The ideas are revealed not only in political slogans, but in such things as how business is regarded, what areas scientists are exploring, and what's popular in fiction, visual arts, architecture, film, and music. This timeline with a multitude of illustrations is meant as a scaffolding on which you can build a better understanding of the past and the present, which will increase your odds of changing the future. The timeline will appear as an 8.5 by 11-inch full-color book in August or September of 2022. The title may change and the cover may change, but this is how it is at this moment. Let me tell you about the sections. Each decade includes the following sections. And incidentally, this video is not meant to be legible. You need the PDF if you want to read the text. Every decade begins with a summary of major events and trends. Then there are events worldwide that had a strong impact on the U.S., a section on politics and culture in the U.S., including a representative quote from each U.S. president. There's a section on economics that includes things like inflation, recessions, depressions, and leading sectors of the U.S. economy. Then we move on to science and technology, which includes subsections, when applicable, on transportation, communication, energy, medicine, food, military, genetics, environmentalism, theoretical science, and inventions. There's a section of books, which includes, separately, bestsellers and cutting-edge works. And there's a section on visual arts, which includes sections on painting and sculpture, also divided into popular and cutting-edge. Incidentally, this decade, 1900 to 1909, includes more illustrations than usual because I wanted to set the context. There is always a section on architecture, again with sections on popular versus cutting edge. There's a section on film, including top-grossing movies, and when we get that far, TV and video games. And the final section is music. Music includes the most popular songs year by year, the most popular albums when we get that far, styles, dances, major works of musical theater, technology, and traditional and cutting-edge orchestral works. So that's the overall layout for each decade. I want to give you a teaser for 1900 to 1909, and again, you need to read the PDF that's attached to the email. The first decade of the 20th century includes, among much else, in worldwide politics, the invasion of China by American, Austro-Hungarian, British, French, German, Italian, Japanese, and Russian troops. In politics in the U.S., there is a quote from the President of the United States praising economic competition. Imagine that. I give a list of the U.S. cabinet positions as of 1903. Under economics, I mention the percentage of GDP consumed by the federal government around 1900. Under science and technology, the U.S. undertakes the construction of the Panama Canal in this decade. And in the center here is Teddy Roosevelt sitting in the cab of a steam shovel in Panama. Under books, one of the bestsellers was Upton Sinclair's muckraking expose of meatpacking in Chicago, which led to the creation of the FDA. Under painting and sculpture, active in this decade were Whistler, Sargent, St. Gaudens, and Brancusi. For this decade, I included a few slightly earlier artworks just to set the context. In architecture, this decade saw Hunts Bilmore and Wright's Roby House. In film, there was Méliès's A Trip to the Moon. This is a picture from that. In music, there was Ragtime, including The Entertainer by Scott Joplin, Marches, and Tin Pan Alley. Cutting-edge orchestral works include Charles Ives's The Unanswered Question, which calls for 3 groups of musicians playing at different tempos with different conductors. If you go to the blog post, there's a list of a few questions that I'd really like feedback from on the PDF, because I don't expect you to be able to read this on the screen. Among the questions are, have I listed what you would think are the most significant events for this decade? Space is limited. There is some room for disagreement, but do tell me if you think there's anything important missing. Also, in every double-page spread, I've tried to allow a little bit of space for you to add your own items if you find something missing. All right, so if you want to see more questions, go to the blog post. It's just easier for you. If you want to receive the PDFs of the timeline and you're not on either my list of supporters or my free email list, you should email me at this address and I will add you and you will get the parts as they come out. Feel free to share any one of the PDFs, but with people that you think would be interested, high school students, college students, but if they choose to receive the other PDFs, ask them to sign up for my mailing list. I do not share my mailing list with anyone ever. And incidentally, I will stop filling requests for the PDFs of the timeline in August 2022 when I expect to publish the book. That's it for this blog post. As always, thank you for listening.